Got it. There's always that like awkward moment while it's like jumping to the live stream.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Everything in the flow.
Right on. Okay. It's on. All right. Welcome, rock stars, to our live stream today. We're talking about how to hack your healing and overcome addictions, how to get rid of your self-sabotaging tendencies. Joining me is the amazing Juniper Soulfire from Hawaii. She's in Kauai, Hawaii this morning. She's the author of this rad book called Rise and Shine. I've got an autographed copy. Source messages, prayers, and practices to awaken the divine within and help you create a miraculous life. We're going to be talking about self-love. We're going to be talking about plant medicines. We're going to do it all here today. So welcome on the inside. If you're joining us live here on Facebook, say hello, drop a comment. If you're tuning into the replay on YouTube or on Facebook, let us know. If you're here live with us on Zoom, let us know here where you're from so we can say hello. And I'm going to be quiet and really just, open this conversation up about healing. I think right now on the planet is a really pivotal time. Everyone is awakening. Some people are having, issues with awakening, with letting go of these self-sabotaging tendencies. Like, hey, raise the hand here, who is not? And I'm so excited to bring you this rad goddess. She is a transformational healer, a spiritual leader, all around rad woman, and a dear friend of mine from Kauai. So Juniper, welcome. And why don't you start by telling us a little bit about like your healing journey, what prompted the book, how did you get into this work, all the things.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be here to have this conversation. I think that there is so much value in what we are going to get into here, and I'm super excited. Also, I just want to put this disclaimer out there. I'm going to go ahead and read the full thing. I did put the little short version in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and read it just to cover all our bases here, okay? So this discussion is for informational purposes only. Psychedelics and sacred ceremonial plants are not for everyone. And although I support safe, mindful, conscious, and respectful use of these powerful substances, I also strongly advise that anyone who is interested in working with psychedelic plants find a trustworthy and experienced facilitator or shaman to oversee them in a region where the consumption of psychedelics is legal. We are not doctors or healthcare practitioners and are not recommending the use of psychedelics without proper support and supervision, but rather we are sharing from our own personal experiences for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research and take action to be informed of the safety and legal concerns in regards to the consumption of psychedelics. There are serious contraindications with various health conditions and pharmaceutical medications. Please do not consume psychedelics, if any medications, especially SSRIs, without consulting a doctor first, if you are on any of these medications. You are fully responsible for the choices you make for your body, your physical and mental health, and your life. And so it is.
And so it is. I second that. And that's important to mention. So thank you for reading the disclaimer. We're going to, talk about all the taboo things here. And that's really been my intention this year, to open up a space to have real conversations about really, important things, transformational healing, healing trauma, and the various ways that we can go about that. So yeah, thank you for reading that. And I know a lot of people here are curious about plant-based medicines and your story and your healing journey, and the book, like, how did this come to be? How did your work come out? How did you like break through all of the judgments and the criticisms that people have about doing what you do?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to share a little bit about my background. So most people don't know this about me. I am actually the daughter of a minister. I grew up in a very conservative religion. And like so many people growing up in the Christian religion in general, there's a lot of, rules. And the fundamental beliefs can be quite, well, limiting, to say the least. And also, there are a lot of different beliefs within, the various Christian religions. So the one that I grew up in was quite strict, and I felt very confined. And I also just felt like I wasn't truly seen or supported in really expressing my true nature. And of course, there was also a lot of feelings of being somewhat devalued for being a girl, honestly. And I think that's something that, our culture is still healing from, even though there's been a lot of progress that's been made. So I am a very free spirit naturally. I'm a Capricorn, and I'm very fiery also, and I'm a redhead, and all these things. And so it was challenging for me to grow up. And also I was the youngest of four. So I feel like I, just felt like I never got the attention that I really needed or the validation that I needed as a child. So I had a lot of limiting beliefs and issues with inadequacy and feeling like I had to live up to the expectations of others. And I really just couldn't be myself. And so as I grew up, I wanted to be a dancer. In fact, my mom had a dream about me before I was even born that I was dancing in a field with her. And the religion that I grew up in, they really frowned on dancing. And so I wasn't allowed to dance. I was allowed to do gymnastics and sports and, all these competitive things, but I wasn't allowed to dance. And honestly, I didn't really even start dancing until I was in my 20s. And
yeah, a lot of you guys don't know this, but Juniper is a rad fire dancer, spins and throws fire. Incredible. What's that?
And they eat it too.
Yeah, incredible. She is a total goddess. I mean, it talk about hitting all the taboos, right? Tattoos, dreads, fire dancer, psychedelics, there's a lot of breakthroughs that you've had. Dancing, I think and a lot of similarities. We're both Capricorns. I also want to be a dancer. I do a lot of dancing. And it can be so difficult to go against the grain, and break out into really being that authentic expression, the creative expression of you, especially as a woman, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. So I started working with psychedelics actually when I was 15 years old was my first psychedelic experience. And, 15 years old, I was just doing it for fun, honestly. It was a completely recreational experience. However, it did change me. Even at that time in my life, it shifted my perspective. It made me start asking questions, really a lot deeper questions than I had ever asked before. And it helped me to embrace more of the unknown and dive in and start really investigating spirituality, even before I understood that that's what I was doing, to be honest. So I would say that, after that experience is really when my spiritual awakening began. But again, I had no idea I just thought these were fun, and it was my first experience with psychedelics was magic mushrooms, psilocybin.
Yeah,
And
who hasn't done magic mushrooms in their teens or 20s?
right?
Yeah. I did the same thing, got into that, did some acid actually when I was in my late, that was a trip, raves in Montreal. I'm from Montreal.
Mhm.
Totally expand your consciousness. I mean, you could go down the route of drugs as a recreational use and kind of addiction, and that can become a crutch, but you can also use it in the way of expanding consciousness, which is the conversation that we're having here. And I know a lot of people are into like microdosing. A lot of my friends, colleagues, it's not just some, oh, let me like goof off with my friends and do mushrooms. Like, no, people like very successful, like multimillionaire entrepreneurs are microdosing, mushrooms every day for creativity. So
Yeah.
we're coming into this new age here. I think of conscious awakening. That's the real big thing here happening on the scene in 2022. And looking at the various ways that we can look into these shadow parts of ourselves. Ego, we're going to talk about that, and I've been following your journey for a few years. I've seen you go through, these relationships, and now in this beautiful relationship with your partner, living in Hawaii in like the most gorgeous location, really watching you, bloom and blossom into this transformational spiritual leader. So like, what are some of the ways that, I mean, I didn't even know like how to jump into this conversation, but like, what are some of the results that you've seen people get in doing work closely with plant medicines? And what are some of your big, breakthroughs been?
Yeah, good question. So I will first, get into a little bit of what other people have experienced and what I've witnessed, and been supportive to as well. I do psychedelic and spiritual integration mentorship, and so I've actually held space for a lot of people during their integration process after their journeys. And I think it's super important. I'll get into that a little bit more later on, but I just want to put that out there. It's ridiculously important. And I honestly, I think it's the most valuable part of working with these sacred plants. So yes, overcoming addiction is huge. Overcoming self-sabotage, deep-rooted limiting beliefs, inadequacy issues, the desire to conform, and living
People pleasing.
people pleasing, yeah, living inauthentically,
Looking for
hiding.
validation outside the self.
Absolutely. All of these things are huge barriers to really living like your most authentic, happy, healthy, and successful life. And when you consume psychedelics, something happens and it really lights up the brain. And it creates these new neurological pathways and areas of the brain start communicating with each other that don't normally communicate with each other. And suddenly there's thousands of more connections happening in the brain that are not normally happening. And so suddenly your brain starts to investigate things differently. It shifts your perspective. It opens up your perspective. Your mind is just like blown wide open, but in a way where suddenly you're going to be so much more creative
And aware.
and aware, absolutely aware. And your mind is able to look for new creative solutions and just ideas. And it's phenomenal. I mean, really, words do not do it justice. It is really
Can
something.
I share a little bit about my experience? Because I've dropped here Juniper's website and her Facebook if you want to reach out to her and ask questions. A lot of people here are asking questions in the chat. junipersoulfire.com. You can find her also, Juniper Renee Soulfire on Facebook. I'll drop the links here for you guys. And I'll put them in the show notes here for YouTube replay. But I was curious about ayahuasca in 2012. I think was my first, only time I ever experienced that. That was quite a trip. Holy smokes! Wow, kind of scared me. But what I experienced was like such a phenomenal, like to the depths. It's like bringing love to all of the dark places inside myself is really what I experienced. And having this like community of people, your heart's just like blown right open. We hung out together for the next 10 days and danced and ate food and just were like in this love bubble. It was incredible. Recently I've explored DMT to get over my own addiction of smoking. And that, holy smokes, will that ever just blast your, I don't even know how to explain the brain, like your ego is like gone. It's that you don't know what the heck is going on.
It's an out of body experience.
An out of body experience. It was quite jarring. And interestingly enough, though, the following few days afterward were such a beautiful red carpet, gentle unfolding of awareness.
We call it the afterglow.
Yeah, it lasted for about 72 hours of like deep peace and heart opening, and oh, look at why I'm doing that. Oh, why would I do this? It was very interesting. I was more blown away by the after effects than, I mean, listen, my brain got blown apart during the actual experience. And I did stop smoking for a little bit. So that was really cool. So I'm very, I'm somebody who likes to try. I want to, I'm very naturally curious. What would you, how would you say this relates to personal relationships? I mean, we could talk about addiction in a variety of ways. We could talk about toxic relationships, addiction to, behaving certain ways, addiction to seeking approval, addictions to eating certain things, right?
Yes.
What are some of the most like radical things that you've like transformations that you've witnessed?
Well, I would have to say that all of those things are things that I've actually witnessed or at least heard stories about people overcoming. And also the root of all of these things is really, it's actually quite simple. And this is my number one takeaway from my time working with psychedelics is self-love. Truly, like when we truly love ourselves, we are not going to sabotage ourselves. We are not going to be living in shame. We're not going to be hiding from our true nature. We're not going to be hiding our authentic selves. We're going to be celebrating ourselves
and expressing ourselves. And just an FYI, that's going to bring a lot of criticism and judgments from other people who are not. And do it anyways. I just got a crazy Facebook comment here this morning on one of my pictures. Yeah, I'm like half naked with a gun on Facebook. Okay. Oh yeah, and it's like the judgment and the criticism, but this is my art now. This is my edge, And it was just a perfect example of like, I could have spent my life hiding out and doing the good girl, and Vanessa doing the coaching and the confidence and cash flow, but folks, like that's not my edge anymore. Right. And we have these traumas, like Juniper is saying, that have us behave in certain ways that it's not authentic. It's not our true self. It's not our fully expressed self. It takes a lot of energy to uphold that identity. And when that's gone, when that's shattered, when that's obliterated, when you're really just, hey, I'm here, I'm me, I don't need validation outside myself. When you really love yourself, because let's talk about that, because people don't like, okay, everyone says love yourself, but like, yeah, but how do you really do that? How do you do that? And how can psychedelics help with that? I think is a really good question. And just know that, you are going to be judged and criticized regardless. Whether you do your art, your gift, whether you share that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the integration process, that's why it's so important, is because that's really where like the work is done. Like during the psychedelic journeys, you have these realizations that just, sometimes they hit you like a ton of bricks. Sometimes, they're a little bit more aloof or whatever. And eventually they come to you maybe over the next day or two after the journey even. But sometimes it's just like, bam, like right in your face. And it becomes like absolutely undeniable. And so then like the question is, what do I do with this? What now? How do I shift this, big thing that I just discovered about myself and I want to change, So it's about then learning how to communicate with not only your divine guidance, but really your own subconscious mind, and understanding that the subconscious mind actually basically is like 95% of our brain power. And so it is really running the show. And our entire lives are built basically on our subconscious beliefs. So rewiring those beliefs with supportive beliefs rather than limiting beliefs. All of our thoughts and choices are based on our beliefs. And so we have to do the work to rewrite our beliefs when we discover a negative limiting belief that's been causing us to make certain choices and behave in certain ways that are not supporting our health and happiness.
Yeah, I got a lot of that actually from your book. A lot of these really beautiful messages and passages. It's a really wonderful book. And there's some rad pictures, like it's color pictures inside of Hawaii. And I know that this was a channeled body of work for you. So what I'm understanding is that you also support people with coaching, afterwards to really integrate some of the lessons. And I'm with you. Most people would not self-sabotage themselves knowingly. We don't know what we don't know, right? It's unconscious. It lives like under the veil. And I'm going to poke again. I'm curious, like, what are some of the most incredible, like, transformations? As I've heard, I've asked you these questions before. We've had a lot of private conversations, you and I. But maybe you could share some of them here, of experiences that people have had, with their loved ones or with, within themselves, some of the massive breakthroughs.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to mostly speak from my own personal journey, and then I will share a little bit of, along the way about clients and obviously keeping everything anonymous. But yeah, so for my own journey, it's just been super powerful to really connect with my own self-worth and really learning to love myself, because that's something that I struggled with. And when you do learn to love yourself, everything sort of just kind of starts to fall into place. It still requires work, but you start to just kind of like see how, like, oh, okay, like when I act more in alignment with self-love, better things happen. And then all you have to do is really start following those yeses. And it's when we go against our inner guidance that things really start to go wrong for us. And that's when we get ourselves into trouble. So learning to really connect with that inner God voice, which is what I call my intuition. And really, honestly, like working with psychedelics has helped me so much to connect with that inner God voice, because it really helped me realize that God lives within me. God is in everything. God is in everyone. God is unlimited, and infinite. So connecting to the God within, and also realizing that in and of itself means that I am worthy. Like, I am a child of God. And my journeys with psychedelics have helped me connect to that unity consciousness that has helped me feel that connection to God. And that's one of the reasons too why overcoming addiction with psychedelics is so powerful, is because one of the root causes of addiction, psychologically speaking, is a lack of connection. And in this day and age, think about like how disconnected are we? How people are just on their phones all the time. Their devices, they're like married to their phones. And growing up, if we don't have that really deep connection with our families, with our primary caregivers, then we're going to have this void inside of us that we're going to want to fill that with something that feels good. Hence addiction.
Yeah, pick your addiction: porn, food, alcohol, substances, shopping. I mean, people, relationships, behaviors, patterns. Yeah, pick your poison, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I struggled with addiction to alcohol and tobacco and just codependency, honestly, too, like they all kind of go together. And I didn't even realize, that I was living like an unhealthy lifestyle. I was really quite unconscious, and I just thought, oh, this is what people do, they party, they drink, they smoke, like and I didn't think much of it until, like I started working with psychedelics more regularly in my, early to mid 20s. And that's when I discovered microdosing. Before that, I had just done like bigger doses and really like gone on a journey. And when I discovered microdosing was when I really found the power with these substances to help me reprogram my mind. And that's also when I really started to embrace my true nature as a dancer and an artist, and really dive into spirituality on a more conscious level. And at that point, I had left the religion that I grew up in. And I remember this was before I even, knew that I was on the path of spiritual awakening. But I remember having a conversation with my grandparents. They were really, really concerned about me when I decided to leave the church. And, they were just like, well, if you don't believe in, the Bible, then what do you believe in? And I just looked at them and I just said, I believe in possibilities. And I was like, and what I don't believe is that, God is limited and fits in this little box that you're trying
or punishing,
Right. Yeah. I was like, you can't confine God to this little box. And I was like, God is not male or female. God is unlimited. God is all powerful. Like, how can you assign a gender to God? I was like, God does not fit in this box, and neither do I. And I was like, that's it. You have to accept that.
I think everyone faces this conditioning, right? Conditioning from our parents, our families, society, school. And it's quite jarring to break away from the conditioning, the norms, the fit into a good girl box. or good boy box. It doesn't have to, we're not just, this is mostly, most of the people on my list are women, but men and women,
Yeah.
the conditioning, right? We really face, and let me know if you guys have any questions here specifically for Juniper. Drop them in the comments in the chat. I would love to see what questions that you have around this topic. But I think that's really the most jarring, a breakaway to go against your family's conditioning, to risk losing the support and the love of the people that raised you, in order to really be who you are, to be creatively expressed, to be free. Really, we're talking about freedom and trusting on that divine love from God. We talk a lot, I love having these conversations with Juniper about God. We're on the same page there. And I think this holds a lot of people back, the fear of judgment, of criticism, of loss of love, of people. I mean, I've worked with entrepreneurs for over a decade, looking at visibility blocks, and this is a massive, you have this calling, this, in, like you would say, intuition or knocking on your heart to go and do this body of work, whatever that might be, whether it's in coaching or supporting people or sharing even your story, writing books, speaking, whatever you want to do. And then, here's the, here are all the limitations. Here are all the, you shouldn't put yourself out there. And I've similarly gotten into really more of my artistry here in the last, well, it's been like 2 years coming, but like, here it is, folks, it's no going back. I'm on the other side. I mean, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would not trade. No, I would not trade it. And I think there really is a sense, and you can hear it when Juniper speaks, of like just poised, grounded, here, present. That peace that I think is priceless. So, I mean, questions, you guys. Any questions? Somebody says, Renee says, honestly, it's a path that I'm going down, though I will not allow my soul to die. That's a great comment, because that is really what happens when we're not living authentically. It feels like a part of us is dead, or a part of us is not really being expressed fully. What would you say to people who are maybe, considering dipping their toes into this, body of work, or who, are curious, how might you guide them or direct them to explore?
Well, I would definitely say, do some research, find a practitioner in your area, facilitator, or go, see a shaman, and really make sure you ask them some questions, vet your facilitator or your shaman, so that you feel really safe and comfortable with them, get to know them, get to know about their past experience, how long they've been working with the plant medicine, and where exactly it comes from and how it's made, if it's a brew, or an extract or something else. And don't be afraid to really investigate them. And some people just, they feel called to maybe work with these medicines on their own, and I don't recommend that necessarily. Like, I absolutely think that it's important that you work with somebody who has a lot of experience, and I would recommend, like, starting with a medicine that really like resonates with you, like read up on the different psychedelics. And there are even, like clinics in the US and in parts of the US at this point where people can go to have psychedelic experiences. I know, especially with psilocybin and ketamine. And psilocybin is personally one of my favorites.
Psilocybin is mushrooms, right? And ketamine is what people would call special K on the street.
Yeah, I guess I haven't really worked with ketamine a whole lot. It's not my medicine, but I believe it's actually, it started out as a horse tranquilizer. Um, so it's like more of a pharmaceutical type of psychedelic. Again, I don't really know a whole lot about it because I tend to work only with plant medicine. I'm not into the synthetic medicines or pharmaceuticals. So psilocybin is one of my personal favorites. And then I've worked with ayahuasca and DMT as well as LSD and MDMA. And yeah, I think that
A lot of people are going to DMT to release grief, trauma in the body. I've seen a lot of documentaries on Netflix about, having emotional breakthroughs, accessing deep-seated fears, pains, emotional trauma. And I can definitely see how, that's one way in. That's if maybe, if you're somebody who's tried, a lot of, because all of this stuff lives in the body. It's not something that you can actually access, sometimes with the brain. And there's some questions here around sabotage. So we have this ego that doesn't want you to, let go of this identity, whatever the identity is. It keeps you safe, it keeps you in control, and so letting these parts, letting go of the armor, letting go of the tendencies, the addiction, you naturally move into new identity, new ways of being, and the ego doesn't like that. And it's not really something that you can become aware of with the mind, because the mind is there to actually, the ego is there to protect to protect you from taking it apart, right? It's like when you hit the eject button or like the delete button in your computer, the computer's like, are you sure you want to delete that? Hey. You're like, yes. It's like, that's how it operates, right? That's how we have the self-sabotage. And what I've come to learn about trauma in the body, it's in the body. It's so getting into, going after an addiction or a self-sabotaging, limiting behavior. Maybe if you've tried, certain things that haven't worked, this might be an option. We have a question from Nara about microdosing. So, like, what was your journey out of it? Where does it come from? How would you do it? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've microdosed primarily with psilocybin mushrooms, and I have also experimented with microdosing with LSD, and both are super beneficial in my opinion, at least from my experience. I would say that with the mushrooms, they're super uplifting for me, but also they really open my heart and allow me to express repressed emotion as well. Sorry, I wouldn't say express it, but release it actually is a better way of phrasing that. Because we don't realize how often we repress our emotions in day-to-day life until suddenly we open up our nervous system and we have a flood of emotions and we're like, oh my gosh, like where is this all coming from? And it's just suddenly like you have to have some sort of emotional purge, which can look like maybe crying, or sometimes if you've repressed anger, then you might need to have a physical release, like punch a pillow or scream into a pillow or something like that and let it out, so that it's no longer living inside of you and robbing you of peace and joy and energy, really life force. So that's been really helpful for me because we're so conditioned to like always keep it together. and
Control. There he
your
is. There's the ego.
emotions.
Control. Be in control. It's not okay. This is the biggest problem, I think, with humanity and the story. We don't like, where are we teaching children in school how to process and manage emotions? How many people
How to
have had
self-regulate.
how to self-regulate the nervous system? How many people grew up with parents who modeled proper emotional regulation to children? I certainly did not. And that's really where all the trauma stems from, right? It's you're raised from a parent who was not emotionally able to manage and regulate their own nervous system, let alone show up for a child. And then we have this, the continuation of trauma, and in the ancestral trauma gets passed down and passed down.
Yeah.
And you're right, when we have, again, the anger is a protective mechanism, or the sadness or the grief or the hopelessness or whatever the heck it is, and then the addiction that comes into, hey, let's not feel that, anything to do but feel that. It takes up a lot of space, right? You can't fill a cup that's already full. So when it's interesting, you talk about mushrooms and psilocybin as opening up the energy so that you can let it go, and then you create the space for something new to arrive. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But then also you have to look at yourself, this is where the integration comes in, is that, you have to ask yourselves like, oh, okay, why did I repress that in the first place? And where did that come from? And, why did that need to come out so in such a strong way? And really do the work to make the adjustments in your day-to-day life to heal yourself, so that you're not repeating those old patterns that are keeping you stuck and replaying these old survival methods, and just really like feeling the same old feelings all the time too. It's like these experiences, they're really, really powerful and amazing, but you have to investigate the why. Like, first of all, what is your why? Of like, why do you want to work with these medicines? What is it that you're wanting to change about your life? And then, why have you not been able to do it thus far? And also, what has been stopping you from really living your true, authentic life? Like, asking yourself these deep questions is really something that you need to do even before you start working with psychedelics, honestly. And I mean, of course, I didn't do that when I was 15 years old. I didn't know. But if you really are thinking about embracing this as a path to healing, then, get clear on your why beforehand, and then your intentions, they will really motivate you to integrate positive changes after your journeys, or maybe throughout, the process of microdosing. But yeah,
And microdosing is not like, you're not going on some wild, holy smokes, blasting yourself out. You can't, even stand up trip. It's a very small little dose of mushrooms. I've tried that.
Yeah, or LSD. There's different, you can microdose with different things, but yeah.
And I like how we're having this conversation today, because I think we're normalizing a little bit some of the fear that, is out there around, oh my gosh, you're going to be a drug addict if you do, these kinds of things. We're really talking about the use of plant medicines as in your healing journey. That's really the edge here. And I think there's so much research out there, but I think there's also a lot of fear out there, right?
Yeah.
I was raised by my father, who was an artist, and his best friend was a freaking shaman. And we used to hang out at, the shaman's house after, in the evening times to spend all of our family holidays. And, we'd go on like, like I was raised like this, from a little child. So I was kind of normalized into the realm of spirituality, past life regressions, drumming, sage, like all the kind of weird, edgy, things was like, oh, this is normal. This is kind of normal. Um, Plant medicine, though, it's just like, that's another edge. And I love that we're bringing some awareness about it as a healing, as a tool on the path to healing.
Okay.
What would you say? Can you share ways that, I know that a lot of people have questions, and maybe some people here they've asked them, but if you're maybe wanting to like do this a little bit more privately, how can people reach out to you? How can they find your work? And then also, what are some of the things that you're excited about that you're working on now with people?
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, I do want to just touch on what you said about, this is not like microdosing is not like some big, journey. It is literally a minute amount of medicine that it just gives you a lift. You're not even really supposed to feel any type of like high. Honestly, I would compare it to, maybe drinking a cup of coffee almost. Like it's so mild, but what it does is it just slightly elevates your state. So you're still completely like, you're basically living a normal life, but it's almost like taking an antidepressant or something like that. It's noticeable, but it's not altering your state to the point of not being able to function.
Yeah, a lot of people have used it for creativity, for
Mhm.
heightened creativity.
Right. Yeah. So I just want to clarify that there is, yeah, it is a really mild amount. Um, and as far as, yeah, connecting with me more, I'm happy to connect with people on Facebook through Facebook Messenger. Please send me a private message, or Instagram. You can send me a private message. Also, if you want to apply to mentor with me, you can fill out the application on my website at junipersoulfire.com. There's a mentorship tab. Go ahead and click on that and scroll to the bottom and you can apply there. You can also find my book on my website. It's available for sale actually on Amazon. So the link there will take you to the Amazon page. And I would love to share a little bit more about my book and how psychedelics were a part of the creation of my book. So it's actually an interesting story. I have been working with ayahuasca for a couple years, and I was feeling really connected. I am still feeling really connected to God. I mean, really one of the best gifts of working with this medicine, specifically with ayahuasca and DMT for me, has been the undeniable realization that I am the creator of my life, and that God lives within me, that I am part of God, and God is within me. And I cannot express enough how beautiful and healing and empowering that is, to just feel so held in the arms of the divine. And my inner peace and my faith has just increased exponentially. And this is a gift that I want to share with the world. And in 2020, shortly after the pandemic started, I started to just notice the immense amount of fear and division that was being displayed on social media primarily, and just in the world in general. And like my heart was breaking. It was so sad for humanity and for the pain that everyone was experiencing. And yet here I am literally living my dream life, completely blissed out and feeling totally safe and free and peaceful. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I really want to share this with people. And so I started journaling and I started channeling these source messages. And I actually reached out to my mom because I got this hit. I was like, oh my gosh, my mom and I should start sharing source messages because she's an amazing writer and she channels as well. And I was like, oh, we should start writing these source messages and sharing them on social media and with pictures of nature and, you know, the lives that we live and, you know, just to help give people some visual inspiration as well, like with these beautiful messages that were flowing through. And so I reached out to my mom and I was like, I feel really strongly that, you know, we should do this together. And it was so funny because she laughs and she's like, wow, well, I guess I really am supposed to do this because, you know, our other friend, he actually reached out and said the same thing to me that him and I should do it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, well, why don't we all just do it together? And so we came together and we started channeling these source messages and we would rotate days. So I was channeling a message every third day and we were sharing them on social media with a beautiful picture of nature or something from our lives, you know, to inspire as well. And we did that for an entire year. And it was such a beautiful experience to just share these beautiful, uplifting messages to help balance the energy a little bit and to help uplift people and remind people to turn to faith rather than allow themselves to be consumed by fear. And at the end of that year, I asked myself, you know, okay, what now? What next? And I asked God and I really tuned in and meditated on it for a little while. And I got the clear direction to take all of my writings and to compile them into a book. Hence, Rise and Shine.
It's a super book. And, you know, I think this really is what we're all here to do as we go through our own awakening and our journey and come to our truths and come to God, our awakening source, that love that never leaves us within. And then we inspire people, right? We share the journey, we share that. And it's just such a beautiful, you're a beautiful expression of that, Juniper. And I highly recommend the book. I've got myself a copy. I started reading it actually on the plane, and it's really interesting because it's like every day, like you have like a day, like day 21, day 23. It's kind of like a message every day. But I was like, this is good. I just like kept reading more. I kind of cheated. I was like, you know, I want to go through. Yeah, it really so beautiful. I think that's what we're all here to do, and we never really know who we're inspiring. You know, having these important conversations. So I want to thank you for taking the time and bringing this rad, kind of risky conversation. You know, like a little bit taboo here. And again, we aren't doctors. You know, we have the disclaimer here. I just wanted to really open up space to have rad conversations with awakened women here this year. And so thank you for being a part of this Radical Intimacy series and sharing your experience, sharing your work, sharing your book with the world. I highly recommend that you reach out to Juniper if you want to learn more. If you have questions, junipersoulfire.com is her website. You can find out about mentorship. Pick up a copy of her book on Amazon. It's called Rise and Shine: Source Messages, Prayers, and Practices to Awaken the Divine Within and Help You Create a Miraculous Life. That is what happens when we overcome addictions and limitations and self-sabotage. We become fully expressed. And it is a very freeing way to live, very peaceful, freeing way to live.
Absolutely. 100%.
Totally worth it. It's going to rock the boat. You're going to rock some people, but do it anyways. And any last words, any last ideas, tips, a quote, something, you know, that you'd love to share with the audience? Put you on
Gosh.
the spot. Put you on the spot.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, I feel like this conversation could just go on for hours and hours, days even. Um, but if there's one thing I want to leave everyone with today, it's to just really know this. You are enough. In fact, you are more than enough, just the way you are. Your existence is proof of that. You are a child of God. You are not here to hide your gifts and play small. Give yourself the gift of owning your value, owning your worth, and your deserving of happiness and health and wealth and joy and freedom. Really own it all and be true to your soul.
Love it. Wise words spoken here today. Thank you, Juniper. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I love today's conversation. Thank you for joining us on this Radical Intimacy series. My name is Vanessa Simpkins from Take Your Power Back Now. Thank you, Juniper Soulfire. Thank you, those of you who tuned in live here on the Zoom, in the Facebook group, catching maybe the replay on YouTube. And we'll catch you guys on the next adventure. Here's to your love, expansion, and freedom. And we'll see you guys real soon.
Aloha.